But when I heard the voice of Professor Badri and I watched the video presented by Brother Abdullah, then I have some ambiguous feeling. Like at the same time, I feel that I heard his voice. But at the same time, I feel sad that Tahir is gone and time flies and he is no more in this world. But anyhow, a scholar says that we born without our will, we die against our will. Then some things which we don't have any control, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him ajr and ajri azim for his scholarly work. Uh, though I think yesterday and today many of our colleagues and scholars they presented the unprecedented contribution of Professor Malik Badri, who had made to the Islamic psychology, and but really he's the founder of this Islamic psychology and what we call um, the father of Islamic psychology. But recently, before this conference, I read a book. He wrote this book. It's in Urdu, but it's a very basic book. And he wrote this book about a late scholar and religious reformist, Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi. And he also mentioned during his interview and many talks. And in this book, when you read this book, then he wasn't only a psychologist, but he was a reformist. He wanted reform in the whole society, and he wanted to bring changes in the society grounded in Islamic teaching, Quran and Sunnah. And in this book, he presented his own story, how he came and how he got acquainted to the real teaching of Islam, and that later on he integrated to the psychology, and then he made this foundation of Islamic psychology. Initially, yesterday, one of the speaker he mentioned that he was trained and he got education in a secular system, even from school to the college, and then he joined the American University in Beirut, and there he studied. And in this book, which I just presented to you, he wrote that when he was in this university, then there were a course on some religious discourse, and they would generate some question, and then the scholars in that time, they were distant from the religion, and then they would give their own um, answer to those questions. Then he thought that I was a bit confused, and because he was coming from the background and he knew Arabic and he had Islamic knowledge, but though he was got training in the secular model schools and colleges, but still he was very much confused what to do and how to answer these questions. And he mentioned in this book that he studied the book that was translated, the actual name that is Dinyat, that is available in Urdu, but that was translated into English, and that book is known as Towards Understanding Islam. That he said that that's why he said that I'm indebted to Maulana Maududi, that he brought changes in my mind, and he answered most of the question which through this discourse came into his mind. And then I will just briefly mention, and then he told me in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in a conference, told me this story, that he also mentioned in this book that he bought a car in Kuwait. He was in Kuwait, then he traveled to Iran, and from Iran he traveled to Afghanistan. That was a very hard journey, and then from that he traveled to via through Torkham, that is a very famous border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then he traveled to Lahore, and then he spent 1 week with Maulana Maududi, and then he traveled back to Sudan. That was the brief story which he mentioned. My point here is that he got education in the colonial time, and he mentioned that that was a secular system. They were distant from religion, and religion was taught as non-material things, and they were talking about material things. They would bring those things to the syllabus and to the curriculum, which was based on the material analogy, and the non-material thing were considered just illusionary. They are just imaginary, and that's why they put religion in that. And this discourse which generate, and I think now we also can work on his can get insight from his teaching regarding this liberal capitalism, which is influencing the mental health system, mental health care system, and basically the whole education and economic system, which ultimately have a great impact on the human mind. If you look at the new liberal capitalism, they have a great impact on the mind of the people, and they develop many challenges to the mental health care providers, because the mental illnesses are increasing day by day. The use of antidepressant is nearly 65%, and even due to this COVID-19, it has exacerbated the occurrence of mental illnesses. The dramatic rises in deaths from suicide, and the use of substance abuse and alcoholism is common everywhere when they apply this uh, um, this analogy of the capitalism. I think we can find solutions in the Professor Malik Badri teaching and his literature and his writings, and what he spoke in different conferences and he mentioned in different conferences. But if you, but I would like just to mention about the impact of new liberal capitalism, which has a great impact, and ultimately that is impact our mental health and increasing mental illnesses day by day. And there are many, even Western scholars, they have mentioned about the impact of new liberal capitalism. For instance, like the Oliver James, he wrote a book on the selfish capitalist, and he also mentioned that because of this policy and adopting this policy, particularly in the United States, they have increased the mental illnesses. The philosophy behind this approach is that they eliminate the restriction on the trade market and cutting social services, and that is the main thing that they provide. On one hand, they think that they are providing development in the society, but at the same time, they are cutting social services, and they don't think about the welfare of the society, but they are just promoting the capitalist ideology and looking for the profit, and they are not looking for the well-being and welfare of the society. This is the impact of the new even the mental health care services. And now if you look at the mental health care services, then that is mostly dominated by the medical psychiatry, and they have medicalized, and the pharmaceutical hegemony have influenced the mental health care system, the whole healthcare system, but we are just talking about the mental health care system. They have cut the social services, that they are not they are not equally working on the welfare of the individuals, but they are just promoting and they are just promoting the pharmaceutical items or the pharmaceutical industries, and ultimately that is the policy which implement by the new liberal mentality, and which affect the system. Now you will think that why we brought this new liberal capitalism in our discussion, and when we are talking about Professor Malik Badri contribution, because like Dr. Abdullah Rothman mentioned about psychotherapy, and he gave us a very good talk and insight about the psychotherapy in the light of Professor Badri teaching. The concept of treatment and the social services in Islamic perspective, that is just to look at the welfare of the individual, to look at the well-being of the individual, to look at the welfare of the society, rather than just to have some monetary gain. And they discourage the monetary, the only monetary aspects of any services, but they think that the first and foremost thing will be the well-being of the individual, the welfare of the society, rather than just the monetary benefits of that system. That's why the Professor Malik Badri, if I heard him, and he was against this Freudian approach, because that is mostly surrounding around the monetary aspects, and very strict to the monetary value of the psychotherapy. And even due to this pharmaceutical hegemony, they also the psychotherapeutic approaches also adopted that model, the new liberal capitalism model, and now they think about the treatment, but they are not thinking about the well-being of the individual. They are not thinking about the welfare of the society, but they are thinking about the monetary benefits. And that's why they put the things in material and non-material thing. Material and non-material thing, the material thing in the form of pharmaceutical hegemony or other hegemony, they take over, and then they sideline the non-material approaches. Another area we can look at the separation between conventional medicine and faith healing, and that's why what I said, that they dissociated religious practices and they call it that is non-material, and the medicine, the pharmaceutical, due to the pharmaceutical hegemony and industries, the dominance of the pharmaceutical industries, then they call this material. And this is why they, even the talk therapy or the social services or the other welfare activities, they were designed in the framework of this new liberal capitalism, and they are not providing the social services to the individuals and to the society, but they are just working on the material aspects of the activity, and they go for this conventional medicine, and they ignore the importance of social services, or they ignore the treatment approaches which is based on faith healing. And mostly, if you look at um, the history of Islamic culture, then the first and foremost aim of the person who providing treatment or medical care was there to help the individual, to look at the well-being of the individual, to look at the welfare of the society, rather than just to focus on the monetary aspects of the treatment. That's why Professor Badri tried to entangle religion and medicine, and depending on their respective social and political context, he tried to make this bridge between the two. And even in some palliative care, he thought that religion is very important, and if we disentangle religion from the medicine, then that is not judicious option. And the best thing is to integrate religion with the medicine. And if we look at the Islamic history, cultural history, then initially even the religious scholars, they provide the treatment for those who are suffering from medical illnesses or psychological illnesses, and mostly they were charging nominal nominal charging, or sometimes they were free, and they were just looking, and the main aim and purpose of their treatment was to look at the well-being of the individual, rather than to focus on the material aspects. If you look at the Professor Badri teaching and his literature and his talks, and I got many opportunities and spoke to him on different issues. Then he was very fond of this human or social being, that it's not in isolation like the material approach that makes the individual, and they focus on the individual. But Professor Badri teaching said that environmental factors are equally important, and the individual is a part of the society. His interaction is very important. He has some distinctive relationship with some other peoples, and even that relationship is not just confined to the blood relationship, but it goes beyond to the blood relationship. And then a healthy relationship is a sign of good mental health, and that is obvious. Even the contemporary psychology also mentioned that the good relationship is also important, and that is a healthy sign of the healthy individual. There are some life-saving relationship, and the strengthening of relationship and public health concern, that is obvious. And some therapies, like if you focus on the schema of focus therapy, then that is usually start from this toxic childhood experiences. If someone has happy childhood, then that lead to healthy adulthood. Then a relationship is very important, and then the Islamic perspective and is in also relationship is very important, and that is a very significant and core value of the Islamic teaching and culture. And that's why Professor Badri explained this in his writing and his speeches. Another aspect which I found, and he also mentioned in this book, that is the social solidarity. And he was very much concerned about the social solidarity. And he said that the relationship go beyond, and that is between the person and their neighbor as well, and between an individual and society, and between a community and other community. Then social solidarity is also very important. And if this aspect is addressed, then one can reduce the mental illnesses and problem. Then he also focused on this family in Islamic teaching, and that is obvious from his teaching and his writings, that that relationship will be a complementary relationship that will be based on true love. That is not a competitive relationship between the husband and the wife. And relationship is very important, and family is a core unit in the Islamic culture, from where the people get the children get training, and they have a interaction with other families. uh, he also mentioned that the relationship of the individual is go beyond immediate family. And if you look at the teaching of Islam, and there is a famous hadith, Aisha, the Prophet's beloved wife, reported that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Gabriel, the angel of revelation, enjoined me insistently with the care of my neighbors, to the extent that I thought that God would grant my neighbor the right to inherit me. That is the impart shows the importance of neighborhood. Then the relationship is not just between the individual and the society or the individual and the family, but it goes beyond, and the neighbors are also important. If you have a good neighbor, then you will have a good relationship. When you have a good relationship, then you will have a good mental health. Another important aspects from his teaching that he was very fond of brotherhood, and he tried for this brotherhood. And he also mentioned that this is very important, because when there is uniformity, when there is a brotherhood, then there will be less discrepancy, there will be no contradiction, there will be unity. And when there is a unity, the people will feel the same, and they won't discriminate themselves on the basis of color or language or any other distinctiveness. They won't make, but they are coming from the Adam and Eve. And I also quoted from the Holy Quran, Surah Hujurat, that Allah created all human beings from Adam and Eve. Uh, these are the core values which are important. That is the social justice, adl, the sincerity, ikhlas. Sincerity is very important. Sometimes we are doing something, but if we don't have sincerity, then that's not possible to do. These are the different things which usually uh, the contemporary psychology, you can say, or the material approach to the human development, they ignore these aspects of the personality. For instance, like excellence, ihsan, and compassion, rahma, and custodianship, amana, that this word is an amana, and Allah has given us these things. The most important thing which contradict the secular approach or the material approach, that is the well-being, that is the falah. And Professor Malik Badri, in his speeches and his writing, also mentioned the falah of the individual and falah of the society. And that is, he referred to the comprehensive state of spiritual, moral, cultural, political, and social economic well-being in this world. And a very comprehensive definition he has given of this falah. And that's why he means by falah that this will be a comprehensive state of spiritual, moral, cultural, political, and socio-economic well-being in this world. He also mentioned about tazkiya, but usually our people take tazkiya and they distinguish, they make a difference between tazkiya and the practical word. But he wasn't the same. As, he went beyond its mystical dimension, and he meant the tazkiya, that is the principle of trusteeship, khilafa, well-being, falah, combined with the growth and purification of tazkiya. That was his philosophy, that he was fond of tazkiya, but at the same time, that tazkiya should be guided by the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the last messenger. And this tazkiya should be grounded in the teaching of Quran and Sunnah. That was his main purpose. And he mentioned in this book as well. And that's why he was influenced by the teaching of Maulana Maududi. And Maulana Maududi has the same concept, that tazkiya doesn't mean that you should go to some remote area and practice on your own, but tazkiya should be grounded in the teaching of Islam, that is Quran and Sunnah. Unity is very important, as I said, and this is from the Surah Hujurat I mentioned. He mentioned some fundamentals of relationship that I gather from his teaching and from the what he follows the scholar and from their work. Human connection with Allah, that is, I think, also mentioned by Abdullah Rothman, and guidance of the Prophet of Allah and relations with him. That is very important, because we have to go through the guidance of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because he got that from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and we have to follow that manual which has given by the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We should be thankful thankfulness to Allah. That is very important. Shukr, acknowledgement in his teaching. If you say, then he all the time is thinking that we should acknowledge the name of the Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and we say shukr by word and by actions. Worship, ibadat, that is mentioned and that is essential. And obedience, ita'at, that is also important. Atiullah wa atiu Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. We have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sincerity, as I mentioned, ikhlas, that is very important. If you are doing something and if you are not sincere, then it won't be working. Adoration, I mean
Excuse
muhabba.
me, Prof.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah,
Just few.
can we finish in 5 minutes?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
finish in
Thank
5
you
minutes.
very much.
Don't, yes, inshallah. Adoration, muhabba, that is used by this, and usually in our local language, they are using different words um, um, uh, instead of this one. I think we should use this adoration, muhabba, because that is a different love. Love for God is different thing than the other love. Fear of Allah, khof ilahi, that is essential, and kindness, modesty, haya is very important, and then adherence, faithfulness, wafadari, that is in our language, but faithfulness is very important, and sense of honor, hamiya is a concept. I didn't find actual word for it in English, but it's a kind of sense of honor that you have, and you feel that honor is near to the khudi in Urdu, I can say, but it's near to the self-actualization. And that is the first person attachment with self-nafs, self-nafs, awareness, recognition, marifa. For nafs, I use usually self. Soul is different thing. Soul is used for the ruh, and ruh is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Training of self, nafs, tarbiyah is the job of the therapist to do it in Islamic psychology, in my understanding. And self, nafs, self-respect, that is izzah, accountability, culpability, ihtisab of self, and activation of nafs lawwama. That is the main approach of in Islamic psychotherapy, to make it activate, and that is I got from the teaching of the Professor Badri and the scholar who followed him. Person relationship with family, society, and state, that is also important. And Professor Badri understanding is purpose of life, that is he mentioned, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah created jinn and ins just for his worship and ibadah, and develop sense of belongingness. That is very important. We have that where we belong and where we will go. Sense of temporal discounting, jaza and saza, where we will get the reward and punishment. That is very important, the temporal discounting. Focus on falah. Our main focus will be on falah and well-being. That's not on other things. The other things will come on his own. And focus on the Radha Ilahi, to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after attaining nafsi mutmainna. Once we reach to the stage of the nafsi mutmainna, then we will get and we will seek the Razai Ilahi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Utilizing granting autonomy with a peace of mind, empowerment. Professor Badri teaching motivate us to educate for the change. Educate for the change in an instance that we should focus on the welfare of the society. We should focus on the well-being of the individual, rather just to focus on the material gains or the monetary gains. And we sincerely we follow the model of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how we can develop a society where the individual can also look after himself or herself, but also feel and think about other fellow, other neighbors, other individuals in the society. And I think this, from this legacy of Professor Malik Badri, we need to invest more into educating academician, clinician, and providers about structural competency, and which teaches about how social, economic, and political forces cause health inequalities. And if you could look at this book and his teaching, then he is not just a psychologist, but he was basically reformist he wanted reform in the whole society because he joined many organizations, he made many organizations, and that's why that was his motive to bring change in the society. He was basically a change agent. He wanted in every walks of life change in the society. Psychology, professionally, he got this one, and that is we appreciate, and he has a unprecedented contribution in psychology. But as a whole, if you look at his movement and if you look at his struggle, that was for the welfare of the society, to bring changes in the society that is grounded in Islamic teaching, that is the Quran and Sunnah. That was his main issue. We must involve social worker, therapists, religious scholars, traditional and faith healers, and community organization and care to help with the treatment. I think this is the book yesterday also mentions a very, that is an enjoyable read. Usually we start from the dilemma of Muslim psychologists, but this is a very profound understanding of the Islamic psychology and Islamic philosophy and this contemplation of his book. This is nice memory. We met in Riyadh in a conference, and this is in Malaysia. We organized a joint conference on Islamic psychology that was in 2015. And Professor Badri and myself, we were the chief organizer of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tahir Khalily, for bringing a comprehensive highlight about Prof. Malik Badri. And after we talk about mental health for the first three speakers, we will